Yeah.
Okay, Wednesday night. That's the Wednesday night before Christmas. I said it's the Wednesday night before Christmas.
Today is. Yeah. I was thinking next Wednesday.
No, that'd be the Wednesday night after Christmas. Yeah, say the Wednesday night before New Year's. Anyway, good to see all of you tonight. And we had a good Christmas program, I think. Everything went well. I tell you what, the 2 hours before the program started, I was really wondering if it was going to go at all, you know. But you got these little bitty angels that's coming up here and wanting to know how they can pull the mic off and get it to themselves, and just typically running around checking everything out, playing in the hay and all that. Well, I didn't know it was going to go at all, but I thought it went, you know, considering everything, it went well. And so we're thankful for that, and I think everybody had a good time. Some of you have been asking about Jim Cotton. I just seen Jim Cotton and talked to him down here at the Shell station, and he said he and his wife are getting a divorce. And of course that's going to split the family up. He's going to get his children this evening. He said, I'm going to go get them now to the mountain back out here, you know, around wherever she lives, Pettigrew. And so anyhow, said that he's got his job now and working a job. So, you know, we need to continue to pray for him and just ask God's blessings. You know, in a situation like that, usually the children are the ones that suffer the most, you know, for something like that. So we want to ask the Lord just to bless each of them during this time. And Wayne Counts and Darlene that come to church here sometimes, usually on a Sunday night, whenever they come, they normally go to Round Mountain, the church. They found out that he's got cancer, pancreatic cancer. I couldn't think of the word there. And then he's got some, I believe Linda said, tumors on his liver. And so we saw him out there at Colton's that day. We ate out there. Remember how he was looking just like he'd lost so much weight. But anyway, they desire our prayers, and I told them, I said, I'll go ahead and make sure the church knows about that tonight so we can all be in prayer for them. And it's hard to find out something like that during the holidays especially. But let's remember and pray for them. And Hunter Eddings, they had a baby boy, and so looked like he might be in a little bit of trouble to start with, but I think he's doing better now. All right, so remember them. And Sue Phillips is going to also have a procedure, I believe, Friday morning at the hospital, and we need to remember and pray for her. Now, I don't know, I'd like for you to remember my mom. Seemed like she's had an episode of falling and things like that going on. And Doug kind of had to lead her to the seat up here the other morning, and saw her kind of stumbling around. So anyway, pray for these folks. They need prayers. But I got something that I want to let. Jim has shingles, and we sure want to remember him in prayer. And shingles on his head, and I guess he's just miserable. He's not going to be able to celebrate Christmas with the family because of that. and it's hurt me. But remember and pray for them. But they sent a box of things back there on their pew. It says that all of the colored bags are for the women. Walmart, I think, has sent some stuff in there for the kids, and for the men, peanut brittle. So that's what they've sent as their gift to the church, and I just think that's that's nice for them to do that, being in the physical condition that he's in right now. But she's always just really creative in what she does, and makes things and hands out to folks, and we just miss them whenever they're not here. But I got a card here. It says, "Our thanks to you." A beautiful card, flowers on the front and everything. And it says, "Dear church family, thank you so much for your prayers, visits, food, flowers. I do not know how anyone can make it through the rough times without the support of a church family. With warmest thanks, grateful hearts, and deep appreciation for your thoughtfulness, love all of you, the family of Oscar Dunaway." And so we love Alma, love her family, and I know when she hurts, all of us hurt. But there's going to be a time whenever we can all just rejoice, amen. And I think we can rejoice. And Uncle Oscar left here and went home, amen. And so praise the Lord for that. So, any other requests tonight?
Put Dorothy on there. She's not feeling well.
Dorothy?
Yeah.
Okay, remember her.
Rough night last night.
Not feeling well. All right. Any others?
My sister Kathy.
Okay, yeah, okay. Mary's sister Kathy needs prayer tonight. Someone else
Still remember my sister Janet.
in Tennessee, remember her. Any others?
Remember my niece Janie.
Your niece, Janie, okay. Others?
I've got an unspoken.
Unspoken, all right, okay. All right, we'll go ahead and just ask the Lord just to bless us tonight. Bless Brother Chuck as he brings our lesson, as he usually comes prepared to do that. And so also remember our Sunday service coming up this Sunday. All right. Our Father, we're thankful tonight for your goodness and your mercy and your long suffering to us. And Father, we're just asking you now that you bless each of us as we've come tonight, that we might listen to the lesson, and help us, Father, that our hearts be open to your word, but help us also to be concerned and compassionate about these that are going through troubled times. Father, each one of them that's been named tonight, no matter if they're having family problems and separations in the family, if it's disease and illness, whatever the case might be tonight, I pray, Lord, that you just be with these people. They're special to us in the church. And I just pray for your blessings. Help them, Lord, to know that tomorrow's another day, that they're going to be able to have a better day. We're praying for. I ask you now, God, that you just bless and guide during this time together tonight, and forgive us in the ways we fail, and we'll be careful to give you the praise in Jesus' name. And amen. Amen. All right. Well, tell you what, let's go ahead and get our song books, and those of you that will join me, come on up here. Number 80 says, "No tears in heaven." Chuck's been talking about that, no tears. That God shall wipe away all tears and all. So we'll start out that song tonight. Savior will be forever, where no more sorrow can dismay. No tears, no tears, no tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears, no tears, no tears up there, no tears in heaven will be known. Some morning yonder we'll cease to ponder o'er things this life has brought to view. All will be clearer, loved ones be dearer, in heaven where all will be made new. No tears, no tears, no tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears, no tears, no tears up there, no tears in heaven will be known. Amen. Someone have a selection tonight.
116.
116. Number 116. We read of a place that's called heaven. It's made for the pure and the free. These truths in God's Word One more.
25.
Which one?
25.
25. When we all get to heaven, amen. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing His mercy and His grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, He'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim's pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Him in glory will the toils of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, soon His beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let's go to number 1A, right in the very front, and the family of God.
I love that.
We'll do that. So you just react to that any way that you feel the best, all right? I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by His blood, joined heirs with Jesus as we travel this far. For I'm part of the family of God. You will notice we say brother and sister around here. It's because we're a family and these folks are so near. When one has a heartache, we all share the tears and rejoice in each victory in this family so dear. I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by His blood, joined heirs with Jesus as we travel this far. new song I sing, from rags unto riches, from the weak to the strong. I'm not worthy to be here, but praise God I belong. I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by His blood, joined heirs with Jesus as we travel this sod. For I'm part of the family of God. All right. You don't have a special tonight, brother? You don't want to sing one without your music, got your CD? A Christmas song? Would you like to sing a Christmas song? Okay. What do you think? One more? There you go. We need to hear you. Each step I take, the Savior goes before me, and with His loving hand, He leads the way. A gentle each step I take, I know that He will guide me to higher ground, He ever leads me on, until someday the last step will be taken. Each step I take just leads me closer home. At times I feel my faith begin to wander, when up ahead I see a chasm wide. It's then I turn and look up to my Savior. I am strong when He is by my side. Each step I take, I know that He will guide me to higher ground. He ever leads me on, until someday the last step will be taken. Each step I take just draws me closer home. I trust in God, no matter come what may, for life eternal is in His hand. He holds the key that opens up the way, that will lead me to the promised land. Each step I take, I know that He will guide me to higher ground. He ever leads me on, until someday that last step will be taken. Each step I take just leads me closer home. Give yourself a hand. You sang too.
I hear that song, it always reminds me of Until Then for some reason. I don't know if the melody's close or what, but there's just something about that song, and I really love both those songs. And I appreciate that. You know, we've been talking about heaven, so tried to get a few songs in there tonight about heaven. And we talked last week about, you know, the things that weren't going to be in heaven and some of the changes. And, you know, when you look at it, you know, how do you explain the unexplainable? You know, something that you've never seen or experienced before. And so John's kind of left in that. But I'm going to read the first 6 verses of chapter 21. And it said, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. You know, those are just beautiful, beautiful words when you read through there and you think about it. You know, we've been talking about, you know, how there is a completely new heaven and a new earth. You know, when we start this study in Genesis, and it talks about the creation, I like what John MacArthur said about it. He said it's when time interrupts eternity and comes into there, and then when we come out of this time, all this time of creation and all the things, you know, the time that we have here now, all of that has to do with time. When we get to the end of time, and we get to the end of all of this, when time ceases, when the heaven and earth cease, and we have a new heaven and a new earth, this is what it's going to be like forever and ever. No more time. We don't have to worry about Christmas. We don't have to worry about, and I get it wrong, 7 more days till shopping days till Christmas, or we won't have to worry about whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday, or whether it's January or February, or 1999 or 2349. You know, none of that will be even, we won't even consider it. There won't be any clocks on the wall. There won't be any need. You know, remember when they're talking about in creation, and he says, you know, behold, it was the evening and the morning and the first day. Well, there's not going to be any more evening because it's all going to be day. We won't have to worry about nighttime. We won't have to worry about darkness. None of these things are going to be there. Remember, last time we talked about the things that weren't going to be there. And a lot of things, we had a little bit of fun with some of that, but, you know, just think of all of these things that are in our lives daily that will no longer be there. All the things that we have to do, you know, if you turn on the news, what are you going to hear on the news? It's going to be bad news. You know, there's just no good news. It's all going to be bad news. Interest rates went up again. You know, there's a war over here. There's inflation over there. There's, you know, cancer here. There's, you know, this or that. People that are struggling with kids not having anything for Christmas. You know, people that don't have food. All these things. There'll be no hunger. There'll be no thirst. There'll be no more dying. There'll be no more pain. No more tears. No more sorrow. All of these things he promises, you know, they won't be there. So there'll be no reason not to be joyful and content, because we'll have everything we need. And next week we're going to talk about, remember a few weeks ago, or actually a couple of months ago, Jasper had said we're about to the end of Revelation, and I said, well, when we get to heaven, we're gonna talk about probably 6 or 7 weeks, or maybe 8 weeks about heaven, and you know, this will be our 4th week, in this, and we still have, like next week, we're gonna talk about the New Jerusalem, this heavenly city that you and I are gonna dwell in. We're gonna talk in a little bit of detail for that for 2 weeks, because it's a massive, unbelievable place. This place that Jesus, you know, in John 14, he said, behold, I go prepare a place for you. Well, that's the New Jerusalem. That's heaven. That's what he's preparing for us. So in the end of chapter 4, you know, we went through all this where it talked about neither death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither any more pain, for the former things are passed away. All of these things, all the things that he just mentioned, all the things that you and I have dealt with, you know, we've got some here tonight that aren't here tonight because they don't feel good. You know, Brother Jim and Belinda and Dorothy and different ones that aren't here because they don't feel good. And there are some of you that are sitting here right now and you probably don't feel good. You know, just because of the aches and pains of everyday life. Well, in heaven, we'll all feel good. You know, you won't have to worry about that smart aleck that always runs around and I feel so good, I'm just full of, you know, pep and energy, and I just feel like, you know, young buck or whatever, like a rotten duck. You know, that's the old term they used to use. You know, a lot of people say, oh man, I wish he'd just shut up. You know, I'm dealing with his back pain, his neck pain, his elbow pain, this, you know, pain in my knee, pain in my foot, whatever. All these different things, and then I've got a doctor's appointment in 3 days, and I'm not looking forward to that. You know, just all that stuff, we don't have to worry about it. All the former things are going to be passed away. All the bad memories, we won't be thinking about the bad things that happened in our life. Those former things are going to be taken away. We'll think about the good thing. We'll be so tied up in the presence of God. You notice 3 times in there it said that God was going to dwell among us. God was going to be our God. We were going to be his people. What a wonderful promise that is. Then in verse 5 he says, he that sat upon the throne said, behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, write, for these words are true and faithful. You notice he says, he that sat on the throne. Who is that? We all know who he's talking about here. It's talking about God. And he said, I make all things new. You know, this present heaven and earth are going to be uncreated, and forever new creation is going to exist. There's not ever going to be another new heaven and another new earth. That one is going to be forever and ever. But you notice he says, he that sat upon the throne said this, and he said, I make all things new. And he said unto me, write, for these words are true and faithful. He had to remind John, in seeing this marvelous city, New Jerusalem, and seeing this new heaven and new truth and new earth, I think he probably was in such an awe. Could you imagine John on the Isle of Patmos on a rock? Actually, that's exactly what that island is. It's just a solid rock for about 5 miles across and about 11 miles long. It's just nothing but rock. He's sitting there and he's getting a glimpse of heaven. Next week he's going to say, this angel took me up to a high mountain. But right now he's sitting on that rock and he's looking at these things. Can you imagine how he feels? You know, if anybody had a right to be down, you know, John, here he is imprisoned on an island. He's 90-some years old. He's not in the best health, more than likely. And, you know, he's dealing with worries about all these people, these churches that he's talked about in the chapter 2 and 3 of Revelation, where he talked about all those churches, and they were struggling and all these things. It's been 25 years since Titus went through and destroyed Jerusalem. Jerusalem at this time had already for 25 years had been overrun by the Romans. Remember when Jesus said, I tell you there's not going to be one stone left upon another? That's what had happened 25 years. John had that. Now he sees a new Jerusalem. Can you imagine the hope that that gave him? Can you imagine how he felt to be able to see this and know this is what's ahead of me? You know, whether I go or whether I stay, this is what awaits me. So it had to be a tremendous deal. And he probably just sat in the awe of all this thing that he was seeing. He probably just put down his pen for a minute. And God had to interrupt him, and he said, look, I want you to share this with other people. I don't want you just to keep this for yourself. A lot of people think, well, we can't read Revelation because Revelation is a closed book and we're not to know these things. No, he says, write these things down and give them to the people. Blessed is the one who reads these words and who abide by these words. You know, he promises a blessing to us. And if John hadn't, if he'd have just quit writing a lot of this stuff now, we wouldn't have known or had written in this. We still got another chapter and a half to go. You know, he would have just been sitting there. But God interrupts him and he says, you know, write, for these words are true and faithful. You know, he says that even though this world that he was sitting on and that heaven that he was looking up to was going to pass away, God's truth and his word is always everlasting. And it says, you know, whether you believe it or not, that, you know, you can understand the truth that it'll come to pass. What he's saying is just as sure as I'm showing this to you, he said, my words are true and faithful. He said, not only am I just showing this to you, but I'm promising this to you. And if I'm promising it to you, someday you'll get to be there. And someday all of those that you've been preaching to that got saved, all those that he preached to and got saved, all those from out, he didn't know, he probably thought that Jesus was fixing to return at any time. He didn't realize there was going to be about 2,000 more years. But all the believers throughout those whole, you know, one thing we've got to look forward to is, as bad as it gets here and as much as we have to deal with, is God's word is faithful and it's true. And he says someday this is all going to be yours. Someday there will be no more pain, there'll be no more sorrow. Someday you'll be able to sit with me. Someday you'll be able to abide with me. You'll be my children and I'll be your God. Is he our God right now? Yes, but not in the same relationship that we'll have up there. When we're up there, we'll be able to see him face to face. We'll be able to see him in his unimpeded glory. Remember we talked about last time how that people never really did actually see God. They saw, you know, flames, or they saw fire, they saw this or that, but they never actually looked upon the person of God. It says those that do would die. No one can look upon God and not die. They have to die. But we'll be there, and because we won't be in our sinful body, we'll be in these new creations, in this new body, this heavenly body, one that's made for that city. These bodies that we're in here are made for here. And when we're resurrected and we're given that new body, that body is made for eternity and for heaven. It'll never wear out. It'll never wear down. You'll never have to have a knee replacement or a hip replacement. You know, all these things are going to be eternal and forever and forever. No arthritis in your hand. Emma will be up there. She can play piano or harp or whatever, just as, and I'll be able to sing too. I know you know that's a miracle. So, you know, if you don't believe in miracles, you'll get to witness one day. But, you know, you think about, we sing about, you know, what heaven's going to be like. And we can, in that song, I can only imagine, you know, our imagination can't even take us to the full extent of it. John writes these things here for us to read and to try to get a glimpse of it. But when we get there and we have those new bodies and we see it in these new eyes, we hear it with our new hearing, and we get to see the fullness and the richness of God for eternity. There's no taking it away. We talk about these gates next week. These gates of pearl. They're never going to be closed. You know, remember the jokes that we all tell about St. Peter being at the pearly gates, and he said, tell me why, he said, I'll open it up and let you in if you can tell me why you should be here, or whatever. Those gates will never be closed, they'll always be open, because there's gonna be access to God, free entrance and exit. Nobody's gonna be held captive, nobody's gonna be able to come in and do any damage or anything, because nobody will have that in their heart or mind. We won't have to have, concealed carry permits or anything, or even have any guns. These people that want to ban guns, guess what? In heaven, there'll be no more guns. That'll be a perfect place for them. They'll love it up there, because we don't need it. There'll be nothing evil there that we'll have to combat. And, in verse 6, he says, and this is really beautiful. He said unto me, it is done. That's the same term that Jesus used on the cross when he said it is finished. Tetelestai. And remember, we talked briefly about that a few years ago when we were in John, about what that term means. And I mentioned it in Sunday school before, but just to show you, he says it's finished. At the cross, he says all redemptive history is completed because I've paid for it. At this time, when he says it is done, it is finished, he's saying that forever, all of these things that I have promised you, everything that has been spoken in my word, he said, it is done. Now all of those things are past. All of these things are going to be future. Eternity is going to be ours. And this word, tetelestai, what it is, it's a legal term. And just kind of to remind you, what they would do when you go to court and the judge would find somebody guilty, they would have a scroll. And they would list everything on that scroll that that person had been accused of, what they had been convicted of, and what their sentence was. And they would roll that scroll up, and they'd say, you have 10 years in prison. They'd take that scroll, roll it up on the door of prison door where that person was in there. They would nail that to that door. And until he paid his debt to society, or paid that debt that he said that was owed at the judgment seat, when that final day came and it was finished, they would take that word and they would write it. They would take that off of the door and they would write it across that bill and hand it to that man, and it said, paid in full. Tetelestai. It is done. It's complete. It's completed. You've served your deal. You're no longer guilty. Think of what that is. He says, Jesus says that it is finished, paid in full. When we go into eternity, it's paid in full. It's done. No more judgment. No more sorrow. None of those things, all those things, he said, those are the former things and those are passed away. I create all things new. You know how many people are in hospitals and sick, and you know how many people take anxiety medicines and things because of the guilt that they have in their life? Most people, really, when it comes down to it, it's the conscience and the guilt that make most people sick over time. Because they worry and they fret about things, and their conscience tells them again and again, Satan is accusing them. God says, it's finished. Don't worry about it. No more worry. No more anxiety. No more guilt. Boy, that's tremendous too when you think about it. No more guilt. It is done. It is finished. When you think about that, it just, when you think about the all-powerfulness and the completeness of the deity of Christ being on the cross, paying for it at that time, looking forward to the day when he could say, it is finished from this point in time on the cross to it's done. the one on the throne. And on the cross, the wooden cross, he's on a golden throne. And he says, it's done. And I love that when I think about not to have to ever worry about it. And he says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And you think about this, he says, Alpha and Omega. You know, we talked about this in chapter 2 and 3 where he said this. He used this term to identify himself. You know, he says, I'm Alpha and Omega. Remember we said the beginning and the end. He began it, he started it, he finished it, he ended it. So when anybody tries to say, you know, bring anything against you, you say, no, it's finished. It's come to an end because he said he ended it. And remember we talked about how that just like it would be like saying A to Z. Alpha and Omega is the Greek alphabet. It would be like A to Z. What happens with all those letters? All of history, everything that's recorded are recorded by letters. Everything that's in the library is letters. These books, these papers, you know, these letters. Without those letters, this thing wouldn't mean anything. And from A to Z, everything that is written throughout all of history, everything that is said, you know, contains those letters. He says everything, all of history, everything is complete because he said, I started it. Remember, in the beginning. We have an in the beginning, God created. Then we have an in the beginning. In first chapter of John, what is that? That's a different in the beginning. He was there at both of them. He was there in the beginning of eternity, and there is no end to it. It goes on and on and on forever. But he says, I began it, and I ended it. It's done, it's finished. And then he says, notice this, he said, I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of water of life freely. You know, when you think about that, he says that this is one of the qualifiers of the people of the residents of heaven. When we read this, he says, I'm going to give to him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. And who are the other ones? He says, he that overcometh. So those who thirst and those who are overcomers are going to be in heaven. That's going to be the residents. And you think about it, you know, those who thirst. Remember in Matthew, he says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness' sake. And we're going to see one of the things that's going to be in heaven, but let's look at Isaiah chapter 55. We've heard this verse numerous times, verse 1. And this is the promise. This is Isaiah the evangelist, not just the prophet, but this is Isaiah the evangelist. And he says, Ho, everyone that thirsteth, come to ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yea, come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which is not satisfying? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight in its fatness. Incline your ear and come unto me, hear, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of God. Remember what he says, to come to these free and living waters. Come, and without supply, without money, there's a never-ending stream of it. You remember what Jesus said to the woman at the well? He says, you know, you come to draw this water out of this well, but I'm going to give you what? Living water. And those that thirst, you know, why did he pick her? It wasn't just because she was there because she had a physical thirst. He says, I want those people that are not satisfied with living in the flesh, that are living in sin, not those people that were satisfied like everybody else and are able to try to replace the living water with all these other things in life. but I want those who want the true and living water. I want those who are thirsty for righteousness. Those who have a hunger and a thirst. He says, I'll give you all kinds of bread. You know, why do you waste your money on things that are not bread? Why do you waste your money on things that don't satisfy? And all of us have done it. All of us still do it at different times. We'll get involved in the things of the world for a little bit, and then we'll realize, boy, this isn't satisfying. I'm missing something. You know, when I got saved, God gave me a peace, and you know something, that peace isn't there now. I want to go back. I thirst for that peace. I thirst for that relationship with God.
Yeah.
And only that satisfies. It's those people that want to be with God. And those people that have a thirst for more, not just for a little of God. They want all of God. Not satisfied with, I'll just take a little bit. We want all of God. And he says, and we'll wrap it up with this about the overcomers. He says, he that overcometh, now this is the second resident, shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. You know, who are the overcomers? You know, when you think about it, let's go to 1 John. Just turn back a few pages here, back to 1 John chapter 5, verses 4 and 5. And this is the first place when we talk about overcomers. In verse 4 of chapter 5 of 1 John, it says, for whatsoever is born of God does what? Overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. So you say, fine, you know, faith, if I have faith, then I've overcome the world. If I have faith, read on. If the good news is yet to come. In verse 5 he says, who is he that overcometh the world, but he that believeth Jesus is the Son of God?
Yeah.
Who is an overcomer? It's not just enough to have faith. And I've met people that have faith in faith, if you believe it or not. You'll ask them, well, what do you believe? How did you get saved? Well, I've got faith. What do you got faith in? I've got faith in faith that I'm going to be okay. Well, that's not enough. He says, you know, unless you believe, if you want to be an overcomer, you can have faith, but it can be misdirected. It'll be like those that will stand before him at the great white judgment in Matthew chapter 7 and say, Lord, Lord, in thy name did we do all this? And he'll say, depart from me. You can have faith. You can't tell me that those people didn't have faith and try to accomplish all the things that they did. And he says, you know, if you believe, who's going to be the ones that are going to be in heaven? It's going to be those that have a thirst for righteousness and those that are overcomers. Let's go to Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3 real quick and see what he says about the overcomer. Remember one time I said when we started this and we got to talking in these chapters about all these verses on overcomers, I said if you ever want to do a really good study sometime, just go through your Bible and just study the things where it talks about overcomers. In Revelation 2 verse 7 it says, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh, I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. He says, where is that at? It's in heaven. He says, to him that overcometh is going to be in heaven. Going to eat of the tree of life, but it's in heaven. So he says, I'm going to give you heaven. In verse 11 he says, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. What did we just read a few weeks ago about the second death? If you're in the second death, you're in hell. You're in the lake of fire. He says, if you're an overcomer, if you believe by faith in Jesus as the Son of God, and you thirst to be in his presence, if you have a grand, unsatisfied desire to be in Jesus' presence, then he says, you're not going to suffer the second death. in chapter 2, verse 17, he says, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh I will give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the white stone a new name written, that no man knoweth, saving him that receiveth." Remember when we talked about this? This white stone, how that back in the days when they had those Ithian games, and kind of like the Olympic games, those that won were given a white stone, and that white stone, they would write on there their new name. They might have been the one that won the 100-meter dash. They might have been the one that won the wrestling match. They might have been, whatever it was, they wrote it on that white stone, and they gave them that white stone. And what did that white stone do? It allowed them entrance into the victor's dinner. The great celebration that they had when they came to the door, if they didn't have that white stone with that new name on there, they couldn't go in. No matter what they wanted to do, they couldn't enter in. But he says, I'm going to give you a new name. You're going to have this white stone, and when you show up, they're going to let you in. Isn't that a wonderful thing to think about, that we're not going to be rejected? Just to go through all of this and to be rejected. In verse 26 he says, "And he that overcometh and keep my works unto the end, to him I will give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron." Now this is talking about during the millennial time, but look at verse 28. This is eternity, and he says, "I will give him the morning star." What does that mean? Give him the morning star. We're going to have access to Jesus. He says, you're going to have full, unabated, and everlasting access. You're going to have Jesus Christ. That's worth it right there.
Amen.
You say, that's worth it all. And then I think just verse 5 of chapter 3, I'm not going to read all of them, I'm going to finish on this one. But these other ones, go read those things. He said, "He that overcometh, he will be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot his name out of the book of life. And don't you love this one? But I will confess his name before the Father and before his name." How would you like to have Jesus Christ confess you before God the Father and before all the holy angels? How would you like to stand in glory on the streets of gold right before the throne and Jesus say, "This is my faithful servant"? Can you imagine? What a promise that is. If others wasn't worth it, that would be worth it. A lot of people, and I need to close real quick, but a lot of people have issues with identity and issues with being, not being proud of themselves, or folks might have said things that were hurtful, or other people might have said things, and it carries on in some people's lives throughout their whole life. And they have shame because of it. Even though, have you ever seen people that you've known, been around, that some people just have their head down because they've been hurt? It's not just because they're shy, but it's because people said things about them that were hurtful and harmful. We should never have that in the church, and we'll never have that in heaven.
Well, everybody remember tonight that Jim and Belinda have left you a Christmas gift right back here in their seat and in the box. And so the colored bags are for the women, and the peanut brittles for us guys. So that's what she's got a note on the box itself. That's what that says. So remember that. I also will be praying for our service coming Sunday, and that will be our service before Christmas. And, so anyway, we're hoping to have a good number that comes to be with us on Sunday.